Hey everybody, again, this is Paul, Rabalais Estate Planning Attorney, and in this video we're going to talk about whether there is a Christmas and birthday gifts exemption from the Medicaid transfer penalties. All right, so that's a mouthful. Let me give you the background, then I'm going to give you the answer, go through some examples so you really understand how this works. So to really back it up, one aspect of estate planning these days, particularly for the middle class, is not only providing for where their assets that they have remaining when they pass away go and who's going to be in charge of seeing to it that that gets done. Not only is that an important part of estate planning, but the bigger worry that many people tell me they have is they want to try to protect what they have in case they go to the nursing home. They say things like, Paul, I want to protect it from the government. Paul, I want to protect it in case I go to the nursing home. Paul, I want to protect it in case I get sick. Because they know and they've seen it with their parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and others that when somebody goes into a nursing home, if they have any money, if they have any what's called countable resources, the nursing homes, depending upon where you live in this great country, they cost maybe $6,000 to $10,000, and you have to pay for it out of your own pocket until you get down to owning $2,000 or less than $2,000 before Long Term Care Medicaid pays that skilled nursing home care. So that's a big deal now. Now, some people transfer assets out of their name before they go into a nursing home so that when they go into a nursing home, they don't have the assets with an expectation of qualifying for the nursing home. Most people are familiar with the 5-year look-back period, which generally means that assets are protected if they are transferred out of your name more than 5 years prior to going into a nursing home and applying for Medicaid. And there's lots of other videos that me and others have made about when you do transfer assets out of your name, whether you should transfer them to individuals like your children or to certain trusts for the benefit of your children so that they get it after you pass away. So more on that, but for now we're just talking about how some people transfer assets out of their name to protect those assets from that forced spin down in case they go into a nursing home owning those assets. So some people ask me, like the person who asked me today, like the person who will ask me next week, and like the 15 or 20 people who will ask me next year or next month or whatever. But Paul, there's I know that the big stuff gotta get it out of your name, the land and the investments, but they don't penalize you for making Christmas and birthday gifts, do you? That stuff's all okay. What's that kind of minimum amount you can give as a birthday or a Christmas gift that they just don't worry about? So, get that question all the time with people expecting me to say something like, oh yeah, you're right. There's the old Medicaid Christmas gift and birthday gift exception, which says you can give away up to X dollars if it's for birthday and if it's for Christmas, and Medicaid doesn't worry about it. That's what they expect to hear out of my mouth, but I've never told that to anybody because it doesn't exist. So I want to really have you understand how that works by giving you a specific example. So let's talk about Esther. And Esther's got some dementia going on, Alzheimer's dementia, and the family realizes, she's got kids and grandkids that all have been helping out and supporting her and love her, but really everybody realizes that Esther's been living independently, perhaps in her home or in an assisted living facility, but it's almost time for Esther to move into a nursing home. So, people realize that her kids realize that the nursing home costs, $7,000 a month. And so the kids kind of know enough to know that maybe they can do some things to spend some of Esther's money down so she doesn't have to spend so much at the nursing home. So Esther, she goes out and she prepays her funeral and she buys some furniture and some medical equipment that she'll need for herself at the funeral home. And perhaps even, maybe we could even say in this example that 6 years earlier, Esther had moved her $250,000 investment account out of her name, and she moved her home and her piece of rental property out of her name. And she moved the rental property out of her name because that's a countable resource that would have to be sold and spent before she qualified for Medicaid. And she moved her home out of her name because that's an exempt asset but subject to Medicaid's estate recovery rights. When Esther dies, they can recover the Medicaid payments that they had made on her behalf. So maybe she transferred all of that stuff out of her name 6 years ago, which is more than the 5-year look-back period. Or we could say in this example, Esther didn't even have any of that stuff. So all she had was the money in the bank. Either way, the situation is going to work itself out the same way. Okay, so now it's a couple of months later, and Esther went and paid for her funeral, bought some equipment, bought some furniture, but she still got $15,000 left in her checking account. And yes, maybe 6 years ago she had transferred the larger assets in her estate out of her estate, but it's been more than 5 years, so that stuff is kind of all clear now. So the family realizes Esther has $15,000. She's prepaid her funeral. She spent all that she can spend on herself. So the family, justifiably realizes that she's going to have to pay for the first couple of months of her nursing home care out of her own pocket to get her $15,000 checking account down to less than $2,000. And if she private pays for 2 months, $7,000 a month, then her checking account will go from $15,000 to $1,000. And the family's thinking she will not have made any transfers out of her name in the previous 5 years, so she'll be eligible for Medicaid, and Medicaid will pick up the tab for the rest of Esther's life. So at that point, Esther or her children on Esther's behalf apply for Medicaid. And I have a couple of pages from the Medicaid manual right here in my hand. So they're filling it out, putting Esther's name, her address, her medical condition, start listing the assets that Esther has. She's got $1,000 in the bank. They list whatever Esther's income is. She's getting some Social Security, maybe even getting some pension. And then they come to question number 31. Question number 31 is, have you, meaning Esther, and I'm paraphrasing it, have you given away any item of value in the past 60 months? Now, family starts realizing, well, Esther, for decades, she's been out of her checking account, she's been, giving away $500 to for each of her 4 children every time her children has a birthday, and every Christmas she gives each of her 4 children $500. And then Esther's a great grandmother. She likes to, and has been, always did it, gave her grandchildren, she's got 12 grandchildren, she gave each of her grandchildren $250 every time her grandchild had a birthday, and for Christmas she would give each of her grandchildren $250. So when they get to that question, they talk about it, and they're like, well, Esther did give away, says anything of value in the last 60 months. So they check yes. And then it goes on to ask what was transferred, when was it transferred, who was it transferred to, how much was it worth. So they disclose all of those birthday and Christmas gifts. They ask the Medicaid people or the nursing home administrator, and of course, Esther and her family certainly aren't going to lie about anything, and they certainly don't want to commit any kind of Medicaid fraud. So they just disclose those little gifts there. But in the past 60 months, when you add up all those birthday and Christmas gifts, Esther had transferred $50,000 out of her name, or given it away in the previous 5 years. $20,000 over 5 years to her 4 children, $30,000 over 5 years to her 12 grandchildren. And so now they're like, like I said, they're not going to lie because, and no one should ever lie on a Medicaid application. In fact, that was question 31, and then right after that is the rights and responsibilities, which I'm just going to read you one or two sentences. By signing this application, you understand that and this is a Louisiana thing, but most states are similar. You understand that the Louisiana Department of Health will check the information you give us to make sure it is accurate. By signing this, you give the Louisiana Department of Health permission to contact any outside source necessary to check this information, process your application, determine eligibility, and otherwise operate the Medicaid program. These outside sources may include, and it's got about 10 things, but one of them, it says the Louisiana Department of Health can contact, and you're giving them permission to contact your banks, financial institutions, and such and such and such and such. Okay, so you jot all that down, you write all that down, and then what happens is, so the family's at a point right now where Esther has $1,000 in her checking account. She's in the nursing home. The nursing home costs $7,000 a month. The family is expecting for Medicaid to pick up that tab from here on out, but on the Medicaid application, the family discloses that, boy, those $250 and $500 birthday and Christmas gifts really added up. Esther transferred $50,000 out of her name in the previous 5 years. So now what's Medicaid going to do? Well, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to deny her Medicaid application. And they're going to deny it because she made transfers in the previous 60 months. And then they're going to assess what's called a penalty period. And what they do is, and I've got certain provisions of our Medicaid manual, the Louisiana Medicaid Eligibility Manual right here. And the first thing that they'll point out is that Louisiana has what's called an average monthly private pay rate for nursing facility services. And Louisiana has determined, whether this is actual or not, that the average monthly cost of a nursing home in Louisiana is $5,000. So what they're going to do is they're going to add up all of Esther's transfers in the previous 5 years, all those Christmas and birthday gifts, and they'll realize that it was $50,000. And they will divide the total amount of those transfers within the previous 5 years, $50,000, they'll divide it by the average monthly private pay rate for nursing facility services in Louisiana, which they say is $5,000. $50,000 divided by $5,000 equals a 10-month penalty period. So they tell Esther and they tell Esther's family, I'm sorry, her Medicaid application is denied. She will not be eligible for Medicaid until 10 months from now. So a little bit more backup on that. So even though Esther made those transfers over the previous 5 years, this 10-month penalty period won't and can't start until Esther is in the nursing home, she applies for Medicaid, and she would qualify except for the fact that she had made some transfers in the previous 5 years. So she's in the nursing home, she has to have less than $2,000, and she can't apply and have that penalty period start until that time. So now the family's in a pickle because Esther has $1,000. Esther's got to stay in the nursing home, and Medicaid's not going to contribute a penny for the next 10 months. So with the nursing home costing $7,000, family's about $70,000 short, because that's what it's going to cost to keep Esther in the nursing home for the next 10 months while this penalty period runs its course. So clearly any transfer of resources is, whether it's around Christmas time or whether it's a birthday gift, can really adversely affect someone's Medicaid eligibility. I will point out one other thing, and love to get some contributory comments right down below in the comments, but I've never seen somebody successfully argue this. But it does say in our Medicaid manual, in the section on transfer of resources for less than fair market value, which is what Esther did, it does say in all cases the individual shall be offered the opportunity to rebut the presumption that a transfer was made to reduce assets in order to qualify for Medicaid. Convincing evidence must be provided which establishes that the transfer was solely for a reason other than to qualify for Medicaid. Now, every transfer is presumed to be, with the intent to qualify for Medicaid, and Like I said, I've never seen someone successfully argue that a transfer should not be penalized. Okay, so be aware of that. I'll keep getting the same question and I'll keep giving the same answer. It's not the answer that someone would expect. I guess the public thinks that the government has written in some exception for Christmas gifts and birthday gifts, but they haven't. So sometimes, long time things that families have done for a very long time have to be disrupted for the purpose of trying to make it easier to qualify for Medicaid and protect what you have. So be aware of that. Esther had been given those gifts for decades, and really if Esther would have done things according to the rules to try to protect what she had, she would have stopped making those transfers on an annual basis, and maybe she would have transferred a larger amount and then stopped and let the 5-year period run. But there's a lot of strategy that can go into what's the best thing Esther should have done. Really important though to me, if you would hit the subscribe button and then the notification bell that's attached to it. Give it a thumbs up. I publish a video every day, 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time, just to educate more people about estate planning and what's involved, and so that you'll have more control and power over keeping what you have, keeping it in the family, keeping it in the bloodline, setting things up so it's easy, and for your family to enjoy what you've worked for. So y'all have a great day. See you next time.